Okay, so hi, Victoria VK Dixon.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. So I am a wife and a mom. I'm a Christian. And you can't tell it by my shelves right now because we're moving, but I do love reading. I'm an avid reader. So, yeah, I've been writing for almost 25 years. I started writing when I was 7. So we're about at 25 years now. And I chose to start writing. Like I knew that's what I wanted to do when I was 14, and so it's been a long time. But I didn't actually publish my first book until I was 20. So I'm still new to the publishing world and to being a full time author for sure. But I've been very blessed, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Um, and so what genres do you write?
I primarily write fantasy and romance, typically together, almost always together. Depending on the story, determines how much fantasy or romance, but there's always some element of both. However, I also love writing all genres. I would love to write a dystopian someday. I want to write contemporary romance, all the things.
I love it. I think once you said something like if it doesn't have romance in it, like I don't want to read it, or not like maybe not that aggressively, but just like
Yeah.
you pair them well. So
Thank you. Yeah,
yeah.
I love romance. I feel like that is the heart of a lot of my stories. Even if they don't read that way immediately. Like Archives of the Warden doesn't start with a whole lot of romance in it, but there is romance. And for me, I have to have a little bit of that to really keep my heart and my mind like fully engaged in the story and like really deeply connect with the story. So I always want a little bit of romance in there. I can read it if there's not some, but I need a tiny smidge.
Right. It's I yeah, I agree. Big fan.
Yes.
So, how can we find your books? Are you traditionally published? Are you independently published? Like, where can we find your books?
So I'm self-published. I do everything myself. So currently my books are only available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble Press. However, I do currently have one book that I am selling through Etsy, and I am sending out myself. But other than that, typically it's just through Amazon or Barnes and Noble Press, and that's exclusively where you can find it right now.
If you could use 5 words to describe your writing style, what would they be?
So this took me a little bit because I had to think about it. So I would say relational, atmospheric, fantastical, complex, and banterific.
I love that you said that because like you are the banter queen. Like
I
the
love
just
banter.
the you just like give and take and you I remember when I first read through Lake of Glass, I was like, these feel like actual brothers. Like this is something I would say to my sibling.
I love
So
it.
it's
I'm
perfect.
that's great because yeah, it's just me and my brother, and I would not say that we don't banter a lot. We have a really great relationship, but we're not very like back and forth with one another or anything like that. Um, but yeah, I love banter, and I can only attribute my dialogue to the TV shows that I've watched over the years.
It's so good.
Thank you.
So, who inspires you most as a writer?
Yeah, this is a really difficult one for me because yeah, for me it's typically I think about works, like books instead of authors specifically. But I was thinking about it, and for me, The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. I read Aragon when I was 14, and that was where I was like, I want to be an author. This is what I want to do. I want to build worlds like this. I want to write stories that are this engaging and amazing. So that was what really solely convinced me. And then through the years, I read J.K. Rowling and Jane Austen and Brandon Sanderson. I just recently found Brandon Sanderson, and I love all their stuff, and they all really inspire me as well.
So, I actually have never read wait, it's Aragorn? I can
Aragon.
picture it. Okay, Aragon. I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
picture. Can I just say Lord of the Rings guy?
Yeah,
Oops.
a lot of people do. A lot of people do. So you're not alone.
I I can picture the cover in my head, and like I've picked it up a couple
Yeah,
times in my school library. I just never got around to it. So,
yeah.
but I've only heard
It's
good
yeah.
things.
I loved it. I plan on doing a reread of it. I found that the paperbacks are only $35 on Amazon. So I think I'm gonna pick that up and then annotate the whole series next year
Naturally,
because
yes.
I love it and I really want to get back, like do a reread of it. So
Great, love it. So, what would you say is the hardest part about writing?
for me, it is time. It's finding the time and just making the time for it because I'm a fast writer. I can write pretty quickly. And theoretically, I could write a book a month or even faster potentially. But just having the time to sit down and actually do the writing is hard because yeah you can write really fast if you can write. For me, I can roughly write a 100,000 word book in 72 hours, but I don't have 72 hours to just sit. So yeah,
Wild.
that's yeah, I know it's a lot. It's very fast, but at the same time, it takes me way longer than that, obviously, to write a book because yeah, I don't have 72 hours to just sit down and churn out a book. But yeah, that's the hardest thing for me is just finding the time.
Yeah, and you have so many stories too that I just like. I want to read them, so I like obviously have to write them first. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah, I think you're doing a great job.
thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So, what is your favorite passage of scripture and why?
So I have two favorites. For me, I have like my writing verse and then I have like my personal like life verse. So for me, my writing verse, the one that I use to kind of guide all of my writing is Philippians 4:8. And I love the Passion Translations version of it, which is keep your thoughts continually fixed on all that is authentic and real, honorable and admirable, beautiful and respectful, pure and holy, merciful and kind, and fasten your thoughts on every glorious work of God, praising him always. So for me, that is how I want my stories I want them to reflect that and to dwell on that, and the themes essentially to be focused on that, because obviously a villain isn't going to reflect all those things, but the story as a whole can. And that's kind of my guiding verse for that. But then my personal verse for like life is Psalm 116:11, which is, you make known to me the path of life. In your presence, there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And it's just kind of my constant reminder verse of God's presence and how important that is in everything you do.
I love it. I don't think I've ever heard that the Passion Translation before, but
Yeah.
yeah, that verse is familiar to me as well, and so
Yeah.
um, that's great that you have. I love that you have like a work verse and like a life verse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's obviously so many different verses that I love, but those two just like stick with me. And every year they just like they're the ones that stick out to me the most. So yeah.
right. Great. So, what's next for you?
Too many things. I'm currently working to publish two more books in my Archives of the Warden series. So I should have two more books out next year with that. And then I am also working to do a Kickstarter for my Warriors and Mages trilogy. And I'm intending to publish all three books at once. So I'm hoping to have that be successful next year so that I can get all three books out. Because I would love to have a completed series out. That probably won't release until January of 2026, but the Kickstarter will be in the like spring, summer of next year.
I'm excited for them to be out.
I'm
I,
very excited.
yes, I have been begging you for this story for like for a while, and just like, hey, how can we finagle legally me getting a copy of this book?
Yeah, well,
Because it's happening. I'm so
it's
excited.
coming. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm very excited about it.
So, if you could recommend three clean, no spice books to others, what would they be?
So, probably the Mistborn trilogy. I just read that one last year and it was crazy. And that's by Brandon Sanderson. I would recommend the Harry Potter series because that one just, I love so much about that. I feel like it really truly influenced a lot of my writing style. And then the Belgariad by David Eddings, which is just a really nice classic fantasy book, fantasy series. And they're pretty small, so they're pretty quick to read through too. And I love that world. Or you could read my books.
Yeah. I've only read one Brandon Sanderson book, and it was actually
Hmm.
one of his sci-fi books. I didn't know he was a
Oh,
fantasy
okay.
author until like last month, maybe. I thought he
Yeah.
just did sci-fi.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'll try it again. I'm not a huge sci-fi reader. I did enjoy Skyward, but
Mm-hmm.
I've only heard good things about him, so
Yeah,
maybe.
he's got some really great stuff. They are a little more heavy and a little more complex than like the Belgariad is it's high fantasy, but it's not quite as intense. There's a lighter air to
Sure,
it, in
yeah.
my opinion. But yeah, Sanderson just has really great, very gripping worlds. So I've been loving it. I've only read a few of his books so far, but my goal for next year is to catch up as much as possible.
Good. I I feel like you'll get it because you read, I feel
We'll
like
see.
almost as quickly as you write too.
I do read a lot. I find that audiobooks are the key now that I'm a mom,
Yes,
especially.
I say an audiobook is a mom's best friend. A reader mom's best
Seriously.
friend. Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah.
So besides reading and writing, what are your hobbies?
So I do CrossFit 3 times a week. And I love watching the competitions, the CrossFit games, and then the Rogue Invitational, which both just happened. So I had a lot of watching time with those things. It's pretty much the only thing I watch. I don't even really watch TV at this point. I also crochet and I play piano, though I've kind of stopped playing piano for a while. I'm trying to get back into it. But yeah, those are pretty much my hobbies.
I don't think I knew that you crocheted.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I was just telling my husband like Friday. I was like I want to learn because I know how to knit and like make bracelets and like other of those like
Mm-hmm.
macrame, like those familiar things, but I can never
Yeah.
get the tension right when I crochet.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so I don't know if like a crochet ring would help, but I would like to learn. I don't know.
Yeah. It takes a little bit to figure out your tension. You definitely do have to practice for a while, but I've been crocheting for a really long time. I did knit for a little bit, but then I found that I liked crocheting better because it's much faster. So yeah.
Right. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, it's really fun. Again, you kind of just have to do a lot of practice to get the tension right, but once you do, it's pretty easy.
Right. Well, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
So, if you're a writer who's hoping to make writing your career, don't wait to start. That is like my biggest advice to everyone. Begin finding your community, begin finding your friends, because they're the ones that are going to help you through this process. They're going to support you and they're going to mean so much to you throughout the journey. And just write like there's no tomorrow. Don't be afraid of taking risks and just go for it. Writing is hard, but it's worth it, and you'll only succeed if you try.
I love that. I think I don't know. I find so much inspiration in your story, and like you wanted to
Mm,
be, like you said, a writer since you were 14, like an author, I
yeah.
guess, since you were 14,
Yeah.
and you had a goal to publish before you turned 30, right? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I just like, oh, she's doing it. Like I could do it, right? And with your help, I am though. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think that is one of the things that I always want to tell people, because I talk to a lot of people and they're like, "Oh, I would love to write, but I'm just not sure how to get into it. I don't know how to start." And I'm like, "Honestly, just start, because that's the only way that you can get going in it." I mean, that's the only way that I got going in it, is I just started at 7. I just wanted to write something and I did. It was really ridiculous and silly because I was 7, but I started then, and over the years, I got better and better, and I did a lot of study. You just got to get going. And yeah, when you're ready to make it a career, when you're actually ready to publish, you just make sure you have people behind you, because that is honestly, that's what has made this whole thing possible for me, is just finding my community and finding connections.
right. I I think you became author in my mind, and then you became friend, and now like friend editor, which is cool
Oh.
too. Just like do this process together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so glad that God brought us together.
Uh,
It's always this weird thing of like how I hate Instagram, but I love Instagram because it's brought me some of the closest friendships that I have and some of the best people that I have in my life. And so yeah, it's kind of that weird love hate relationship. But then you're like, man, I can't imagine not having these people in my life. So I'm so grateful to Instagram for being a platform where I could find these relationships, where God could bring you into my life, because yeah, it's been so wonderful to have your friendship and all the other friendships that I've found on there.
well, thank you.
Mhm.
Would you be willing to give us a brief testimony?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian household. So for me, God was always part of my life. Obviously, I don't remember it, but my parents always told me when I was 2 years old, I asked if I could ask Jesus into my heart. So for my entire life, for as long as I've remembered, I've been a Christian. When I was a kid, as I got older and everything, I went to like vacation Bible schools and stuff like that. And I remember, I think I was like 7 or 8, and I rededicated my life to Christ and stuff. So, it was a little more of I remember making that declaration, but just through the years, I found that, I had to take more responsibility for my relationship with Christ versus just letting it be, hey, I am a Christian. And so, especially in my teen years, I started really pursuing a relationship with God. And my family moved to Miami for a short period of time. And I remember that there was one girl in my youth group that she just had this really beautiful relationship with God, and she just loved him so much. And I remember being so inspired by her, and wanting to be like her and have that relationship with him. And so I would say that was probably the time in my life where I truly started seeking him as a personal friend and confidant, and someone that I relied on, versus it just being, oh yeah, he's my God, he's my Lord. It became a much more personal, relational thing. So yeah, I it's been a long time. It's been my whole life, but I am very, very thankful and very, very blessed to be surrounded by a lot of wonderful Christian family and friends. So, yeah, yeah, I'm very blessed.
Praise the Lord. I love those
Yeah.
stories where, like they grew up in the church. Mine is
Hmm.
similar. Like I grew up with Christian parents, and
Yeah.
I used to be like, oh, my life isn't like that story isn't that cool because it's my whole life.
Yeah.
But I actually like now as a parent, like praise the Lord. I hope that my
Yeah.
children can say the same thing one day.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing where it almost feels like it's not a testimony because you didn't go through some life changing thing. Um, and so you almost feel kind of like lame because it's just always been part of your life. But in a lot of ways, the testimony is the fact that God was able to work through your family, and he surrounded you with such wonderful blessings. And yeah, I'm just very thankful for that.